hope you had a great day yesterday, energized by the conversations you had, the people you met, and hopefully a few cocktails last night in the room next door. And for those of you joining us today, welcome along. But it wasn't just going on in this room. You might not have realized as we were sitting here, the world was watching on Reuters.com and across the Reuters social platforms as well. We actually had over 1.2 million people join us over the course of yesterday, which I think is truly inspiring, it's incredible, and I think it's also just really important that people get an opportunity to see into these important conversations that we're having on this stage and in this room. So once again, a very warm welcome if you are joining us around the world on the global virtual broadcast. I think it'd be a really nice thing, just let us know where you're watching from, just go on whatever platform you're on, just let us know where you are, and you can really see that global community that is forming around this event. So listening to yesterday's discussions, I think three words really stood out in everything for me. So they were trust, purpose, and collaboration. I think those first two words need to guide everything we do as we imagine the future and what technology can really do to transform it. And the third word, collaboration, I think is the only way in which we can actually deliver on that trust and fulfill the purpose that we spent so much time talking about yesterday. And I thought it was super exciting because what I was seeing in front of me in here and in the room next door and outside in all those conversations was that collaboration that was happening between people. And when I got up here yesterday to start things off and set the scene, I said one of the reasons why we wanted to create this event is because when we were speaking to people, they said they needed a space to sometimes get out of those day-to-day silos, meet people from other industries that, quite frankly, when we're all really busy on another Teams call, that you don't get that opportunity to do. So thank you for entering into the spirit of which it was intended. Thank you for shaking hands, meeting people, entering into those conversations. You did a brilliant job, and all I can do is say, keep going today and have more of those conversations, and hopefully you'll go back to the office tomorrow over the next few days, inspired with a few new ways of thinking. It might only be one thing, but that one thing might be the thing that you take back to the team and really pushes things forward. So thank you very much. Have a great day, and I'd like to introduce our first fireside chat for the day. So we have a session titled Establishing a New Hub for America's Leading Tech Companies. It's with Mayor Parker of the City of Fort Worth, and your moderator is Luke James, Head of Product and Strategy at Reuters Events. If you could welcome to the stage, please.
Have a seat.
Good morning.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Finishing some sentences already,
That's
aren't we?
right.
I know. Absolute pleasure, Mattie, to have you on stage, or Mayor Parker. May I call you Mattie?
Please, yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, I think Gareth's words there were pretty poignant in terms of collaboration and trust. And in terms of Mayor Parker here, we've got one of the fastest growing cities in the US, doing incredible things from mobility, education, Bitcoin, which we'll talk to. But Mattie, you've got an incredible CV. I think you're the youngest mayor of one of the fastest growing cities in the US, at 37, only last year.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. Am I right that you were also on the Times Next 100 this year announced as well as the Rising Stars globally?
Yeah, that's an awesome honor, obviously, to represent my city on the list of leaders across the world. So that'll be a fun party in New York in a few weeks.
Fantastic. So to kick off, talk to us about the actual vision for Fort Worth, what your goal is in 12 months, in 24 months, and then beyond.
So I think for those of you who aren't familiar with Fort Worth, obviously we're in Texas, we're a part of North Texas, which, by the way, the North Texas region will pass Chicago in the next several years as the third largest metro area in the country, which is hard for many of us to believe. Fort Worth was a small town for about 500,000 people for a number of years, and then growth really exploded. We have over 390 people that move to our city every single day right now. And so as mayor, the number one thing you have to do is obviously be smart about managing the growth for those that are there, but recasting a vision for who Fort Worth is now and into the future, which is why I ran for mayor in the first place. You really have to understand that the heart of America right now, we call it the heartland, you had this massive migration happening from coastal cities to cities like Fort Worth, even pre-COVID, and it's only further exacerbated now. And so as a community, we have to really recast a vision on who we want to be in the future and what is industry and business, and which is why I wanted to come this morning and really talk about technology as a big piece of that.
We're going to come to technology as a main part of this, but first, just to frame that, a big part yesterday was collaboration. We spoke to business as driving this change, but often it is the public sector as the facilitator. How do you see Fort Worth's role in bringing industry to the city, to working with tech companies to enable growth?
Yeah. So I come at this from an angle, for 20 years, I was really in state, federal, and local government. I practiced law. I can tell you what government can do well, and I can tell you what it doesn't. And honestly, maybe one inspiration I give with you today is wherever you live across the world in the United States, understand what's happening in your local city and what can your respective industry or business do. If you're a CTO or a CIO, your expertise is absolutely needed in city government because we move at a snail's pace. And there's so much opportunity right now, thanks to the phones that are sitting in your hands right now or next to you at your laptops. The world is at your fingertips. And the way that cities and governments respond is only going to be dependent upon the private industry really pushing us forward. And we have some great partnerships in Fort Worth that we could talk about more. Specifically would be Hillwood and Mobility Innovation Zone at Alliance is really significant. We have a new Entrepreneurship and Innovation Committee, which I love asking our city staff to sit around the table with those committee members to really understand what does it look like moving forward in the city of Fort Worth and what is private industry doing. The second piece is oftentimes we have to be more risk adverse on behalf of our taxpayers, and that's understandable. But when you create these really great partnerships with private sector, you can allow them to take a little more risk for you or inform what the process should look like. And we've learned a lot about that in the P3 process in Fort Worth.
Mattie, are there any specific examples, could be health, mobility, where you can really pinpoint a nice example of Fort Worth working with tech industry?
Yeah, so we've just partnered with Techstar. In Fort Worth, which many of you know as a global investment accelerator, and we've created the world's first health accelerator in our city. It was a partnership between Goff Capital Health Science Center, Tarrant County, in the city of Fort Worth. We actually used ARPA dollars that the federal government handed out. So rather than just using those for one-time uses, we thought, let's do something really significant. Our economic development department helped us make that happen. So now we have 10 high-growth startups that are right now in their early stages in Fort Worth, really focus on physical mobility and using technology to really help people's health move forward. So we're excited about that opportunity.
Fantastic. And I think at this time last year, I was speaking with Mayor Adler in Austin around all the work he's been doing in his mayorship around mobility and transportation.
Yeah.
You mentioned access there. access is a key part of that sort of mobility transportation piece. Are you looking at stuff in a similar capacity in terms of access to goods, services, and what Fort Worth can do as a growing city, also to serve this rapidly growing population?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the MIZ, our Mobility Innovation Zone with Hillwood and Alliance, Texas. Our goal really is to make mobility innovation, Fort Worth and mobility innovation synonymous across the world, and you understand what's happening in our city. We have a variety of different companies anchored now in our community, focused first on cargo that can be moved autonomously through trucking or vehicles. We also are home to Bell, and I think just in the next few days you'll see the first demo of an air taxi in Fort Worth, Texas, which is really exciting for us. So mobility is changing rapidly. I think the one thing we struggle with in cities, in a place like Fort Worth, is public transportation. What does the future of public transportation look like in a sprawled city like Fort Worth, or any Texas city for that matter? And so we're really in that learning curve right now with understanding how to partner better with private sector.
And talk to me a little bit about the decision-making process. There's an absolute host of amazing solutions from the tech world. How are you seeing them? How are you identifying them and selecting which you want to actually work with more closely?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do, back to the people in this room, is I have to be willing to open my door and just learn new things from industry. Like, what's happening? Where do you think there's opportunity? And then offering that. That's how the Bitcoin deal happened, right? That was not city government sitting around like, we should mine Bitcoin, right? Really, it was more about what is happening in technology companies right now, and cryptocurrencies at the center of that, blockchain technology, and then working with the Texas Blockchain Council to make that possible. Those are just simple conversations and me having an open door at the City Hall. And then a special tribute to some city staff members that we have that are really thinking outside the box and making this a goal that they have to understand where we're headed.
So on the Bitcoin piece, I imagine folk in the room may have some awareness, but maybe to people watching more globally, talk to us what that is, where you've come and what you've achieved so far.
So we were the first city really in the world to mine Bitcoin as a community. So we did so in a way that was zero risk to taxpayers. We had 3 mining machines donated to us, able to plug them into our server room at City Hall. Why would a city do that? First and foremost, when you're a city like Fort Worth, Texas, you want to be on the map. It worked for us. We had over 700 million impressions across the world. I was doing interviews with CNBC and others, things talking about our city in a new and different way, which I was really happy about. The second piece is understanding we have industry leaders in Texas that are really looking at Texas blockchain with Texas Blockchain Council to help us inform this process. So the pilot program's almost up. We'll do a report to City Council in the next few weeks. I like ruffling feathers, right? If you're going to be a millennial mayor, why not do things a little bit differently? I learned a tremendous amount in that process. By no means are we taking a side on cryptocurrency. This was really a learning curve for us. And what's great is there are technology companies that took an interest in Fort Worth that wouldn't have before because they didn't know who we were. They didn't understand the story and what we're trying to do differently. And as a mayor of a fast-growing city, that's my number one priority.
I know you mentioned the report's a couple of weeks away. Is there anything already before that you can share, sort of bigger picture of what you've learned, or is it still we've got to wait till the report comes?
I can't get in front of city council members. They get a little fussy. But I will say this, that I hope that it continues, right? And we enter this next legislative process in Austin starting in January. And how do we partner with our legislative leaders in Austin and understand what does it look like for Texas to be known more synonymously with cryptocurrency as well? So I think we're in that learning place right now.
And you mentioned what it did for the profile of the city and bringing awareness and I suppose business into Fort Worth. Is that looking at hype cycles of tech as well and thinking actually what, from a solution base or just from an awareness and a profile perspective, we can look at which will help us?
Yeah.
Is that something you're looking at? Are you looking at the hottest trends now, sort of to say where do we want to be
Yeah.
next year? Well, what's our next pilot going to be?
Well, I think for Fort Worth, I mean, look, technology is in every single industry now, right? And some people, we want to be a city that's a tech hub, but I would argue we actually already are if we are selling our companies better. I mean, we're home to Lockheed Martin where the F-35 is built in Fort Worth, right? They're going to hire over 38,000 people in the next 20 years in our city. Every single employee, no matter what their role is, will have something to do with technology. We're home to companies like Paul Andrews TTI, that's now a Berkshire Hathaway company. BNSF is now a technology company. I could keep going. We're also home to some really important tech-enabling companies like Deloitte and Charles Schwab, just on the outskirts of Fort Worth. So my job as mayor to really understand what does the next innovation look like, and how do you embrace the technology that's happening in those private sector companies to understand what do you need from city government. Sometimes it's just get out of the way, right? But sometimes it's actually to facilitate more growth and opportunity, and that's something we're working on in our city.
So we've spoken to the Bitcoin piece. We've spoken on mobility. I know education is something you've got a strong passion and background in. We spoke earlier, you mentioned the T3 partnership.
Yeah.
Give the folks a quick synopsis of what T3 was, and also then how EdTech is something which actually has a huge potential for the city, and actually the younger population is growing up in it.
So many of you, depending on where you live, you've probably heard of college promise programs, right? Where you're trying to make tuition free for students to go on to college. Over a series of years, when I was still chief of staff, our former mayor, we started traveling the country, understanding what College Promise can offer for students and what's missing. The key thing is this. I'll give you some statistics for Tarrant County, but they're no different, honestly, across major urban counties in this country. In the United States right now, in Tarrant County, only 23% of our students make it to a 2-year or 4-year credential after high school graduation. 70% of jobs require a post-secondary credential. Business leaders like yourselves are screaming for talent. What is missing is your innovation infused into K-12 institutions education. It has to change rapidly and now. We are so far behind. We are educating our students the same way we have been since the 50s and 60s and expecting those students to graduate high school and be successful. It's not working. The second thing in the United States we've got to do is stop telling every kid they need to go to 4 university. It's not working. There are reasons why major companies are now saying, come to me at 18, I'll train you. I mentioned BNSF earlier. 85% of their jobs only require a high school diploma, but they want to do all the training within. We have to embed something differently in K through 12. And technology is a huge piece of that. If you talk to leaders across our city, especially in our urban school districts situated inside of our loop, they would tell you technology is one of the most intimidating things as instructors, but it's also something their students are trying to keep up with because they're carrying around these smartphones in their pockets. It's all at their fingertips. We have to teach students how to use technology for good and further their education. I could go on a tirade about this some more, so I can just tell you what we're doing in Tarrant County is working. And there are examples probably in all of your cities that I could point to in nonprofit and philanthropy that are leading in this effort. What is missing usually is business leaders able to work with K through 12 because the bureaucracy makes you all crazy and you don't have time for it, right? But you would love to be able to get your hands on influential 16 and 17-year-olds who are really eager to come and work in your companies. They just don't know those possibilities are there. So there's a lot of conversation in the country right now around racial equity work, especially education. It matters, but you have to show these students that come from low-income backgrounds and zip codes where quality education doesn't exist, you have to show them there is something different and possible for them. And I promise you, it's not always just the teacher. It has to be a business leader like yourselves to really open up their possibility.
It was a pretty inspirational response. You know, we had a conversation yesterday about young 20-year-olds doing some really, really amazing projects in the biosphere, for those of you who recall. And there is this gap between maybe business are looking at talent, but maybe their purpose isn't aligning. And I think what you've spoken to there on that 16 to 20 gap is huge. And I think I want to sort of move on to your vision. So Fort Worth is this rapidly growing city. It's increasingly getting attention on a global scale. What's your vision? And you know, if we speak again in a year's time, in 2 years' time, what do you want to say? Hey, you know, we spoke to Tech for Good, we spoke to education, we're sampling new models of technology we can use. What should we expect?
Well, I think first of all, if you haven't been to Fort Worth, I would describe us as a surprising city. When you come to us for the first time and you visit the historic Fort Worth stockyards and you understand what it looks like to stay in a world-class hotel but also see the world's only twice-daily cattle drive in the stockyards, or go to a concert at Billy Bob's. But you can also go to our cultural district and visit the Kimball, or go down to Sundance Square. There are beautiful places across our city. So first of all, we're surprising. We're not Dallas, right? We're almost 45-minute drive from the city of Dallas. We're the 13th largest city and rapidly growing. We're expected to eclipse Austin in the next 10 years, which is really hard for those of us to believe that have good roots here in this city. But technology needs to be something for all people. And in our community, the number one priority I have is making sure we're taking care of our small business community and those that live in our city, to make sure technology is available to them, which is kind of why being in a room like this is really exciting to me. Secondly, what does it look like to attract and retain top talent? Businesses follow talent, period. And you've seen that across COVID. Why do you think businesses are relocating? Because the talent is relocating. And the number one thing I should do as mayor is make sure we have a high quality of life in our community. A beautiful city, parks, public safety, all of those things. That's what every mayor really wants in their community. But now people are really responding by moving their families across the country to a city that they want to live in, and then businesses will respond accordingly. So I think in a year's time, you're going to see these efforts really bear fruit. And it may not be the big corporate relocation. We would love to have that also. But the next startup growth opportunity can absolutely happen in Fort Worth because we're hungry for that talent. We don't take you for granted. And importantly, I hope you've noticed from why a mayor would come to an event like this and wake up at 4 a.m. to get here to drive in is really because our doors are open. I want to learn from industry leaders like yourselves to understand what it needs to move a city forward.
Fantastic. And actually, my final question, Mattie, was going to be almost a takeaway. You semi-touched on it there. You folk in front of us, what's your message to them? And that they could be from big business or startup. Is it the same message? Is it nuanced? And what would you leave them with?
Well, first I would say if you depending on what your company does or is looking at, introduce yourself to Fort Worth. There's always a connection point, whether your company's moving or just has business in a city like us. So please come visit us. The second piece would be, even if you're not, I do care about other American cities. If you're working across this country, touch base with who your city government is. When was the last time you attended a city council meeting? Do you know who your mayor is, your city council member? What are they doing that you think that is missing, especially as someone that's leading in technology and information technology in your respective companies? I promise you, a 10-minute conversation will open their eyes to so much. So maybe when you go home, use that as a level of inspiration. You
just made me think. Final question, I promise. Other cities, what's your relationship like with other mayors? Are you looking at this very much on the same page? Is it a collaborative approach? Are there cities which you share ideas, and who might they be?
Well, I think unlike a lot of other political systems that you see where there's constant infighting and partisanship, mayors really do work together. Councils usually work together. Most of us run nonpartisan, at least we do in my city. But it's not uncommon for me to touch base with mayors across this country, whether it's Greg Fisher in Louisville or Kate Gallego in Phoenix, Mayor Suarez in Miami. It is really fun. I also think your mayors usually reflect the flavor of your city. I told this story at my State of the City a few weeks ago, but we had a great party in Austin for South by Southwest. We had the Fort Worth House. We looked really cool. We had a hip-hop band playing, and I invited some mayors who were all in town for South by. Mayor Adler was there, and Mayor Suarez was on this balcony hanging out, dancing. It's cold outside, by the way, and he's got his shirt unbuttoned. He's tan. He's dancing, and someone goes, "That's got to be the mayor of Miami." And I joked that we sort of do reflect and work together. I think that, I hope that for this country and all the political upheaval, mayors can be an inspiration what it looks like to get things done and work together.
Well, I mean, you sound like a great bunch to go out with.
Yeah, we are a lot of fun, for sure.
Fantastic. Well, look, Mayor Parker, absolute privilege talking to you today.
Thank you.
And please hear the message, talk to Fort Worth, and keep the conversation going.
Come see us. Thank you all very much. Have a great day.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Mayor Parker and Luke for that.